Fallout 76's Expedition update is finally here. After years of mentions and revisions, we were finally able to play Expeditions for ourselves and leave the map of Appalachia for the first time. And this will be taking us to a familiar place with the Pit from Fallout 3's DLC. This update is one of the largest the game has ever gotten, really in two ways. The download size itself is pretty massive. Xbox users have a roughly 80 gigabyte download, which is kind of insane, but also in just the presence of this one. It definitely feels like Bethesda was marketing this to a much wider audience overall, the first off-map expedition, and of course that return and connection to Fallout 3. And it seems like expeditions are a fundamental new feature that they will iterate on in the future. It's not the end of this tale. Either way, in this video I'll go over some of the major new things that are added, what expeditions actually look like, some of the new bugs that you can experience day one, and my overall thoughts on the update, for those of you that are perhaps already familiar with what expeditions look like, because I have some fairly strong opinions on this one. Okay, so of course expeditions are the big new feature here, and there are really two ways to do this. You can either join another team. There's a convenient new expedition team you can create or join. So just like any other public team, once you join this, you go into the menu and then you could actually join that expedition using this new button, or of course host an expedition yourself. And you'll probably be doing both, even if you're somebody who typically plays solo, because you can only host one expedition per day. So basically you could host one expedition either by yourself or as a team leader per day, but then from that point forward you could do an unlimited amount. You just have to be joining other people's teams, whether that be one of your friends or just some strangers online. And as a solo player myself, this is actually kind of a big blow. At any point I could only do one per day unless I'm relying on other people to play. And unfortunately you can't actually just start the expedition. You have to do a little bit of work first. With Expeditions, White Springs got an overhaul. New people have moved in here with the Responders, this being one of the OG Fallout 76 factions. They are making a return, which is really cool to see. I'm actually really happy they're doing a bit more with the Responders instead of just introducing some new faction. And via this you'll get a fair amount of dialogue in this now overhauled location, but the long and short of it is the Responders have a vertibird that you are able to use to go to the pit, but they're not going to just let you do that for free. And if you want to use their vertibird, you'll have to get fuel. To get fuel, you're going to have to do 3 daily quests. As the title suggests, these are 3 quests you're going to have to do every single day to do an expedition. So these daily quests are really short, but also pretty tedious. You'll be able to get all of them done in about 10 minutes or so, at the very least, if you're a high level. One will involve you helping a chef. You're going to have to run around the newly added White Springs Refuge looking for ingredients as well as mixing the stew. After you're done, you actually do get a pretty nice buff where you'll need less food and water for a set amount of time, and you could feed the raiders or settlers in White Springs to get a boost to their reputation depending on who you feed. A responder is running a donation drive, and every single day they're going to ask you for 50 junk of some kind. This is one of those ones that could be really annoying or really easy. Some days you'll just have all of that junk. Probably a lot of days, especially early on, you just get it from your stash and give it to this person. But of course, if you don't have copious amounts of junk, you'll now have to go get whatever that thing is, and that could take a while. And 50 junk a day can add up very quickly if you do expeditions regularly. But if you're playing that much, you probably have a lot of junk anyway. And then lastly, you'll have one of 2 quests, and this is definitely the meatiest of the bunch. You'll have to go out into Appalachia for someone and find something, or take a picture for someone and then return with that item. It's really just the meatiest because you're going to have to actually go somewhere else every single time. And yeah, doing these daily quests kind of stink. They're not that time consuming, but they're also not that fun. It's just tedious and annoying. But I guess Bethesda is trying to increase playtime on Fallout 76. And there is a pretty nice quality of life feature with this update that will add to that, where you can now fast travel directly inside of locations. So you can fast travel to the White Springs Refuge directly, and this also applies to other notable locations in Fallout 76. But from there, you are off on your very own expedition. There's a new menu where you can launch this after completing your dailies, and you have 2 choices here. You either do Union Dues or From Ashes to Fire. And the way this is going to work is technically both of these are going to be locations in the pit. Each mission will be a different mission in a different place with different people. And although this is the pit from Fallout 3, it's also not. Like, we're in a different part of town for most of it. So if you've played the pit and you're looking forward to seeing the same places, this is actually largely in a different place. Like, let's just say hypothetically the Fallout 3 world space is like 3 blocks over in the other direction. And with both of these missions, the world spaces they add in are very pretty. They're going to have both an external and an internal part, but it is absolutely some top tier level design work, and they did a really good job at making this feel different. You don't feel like you're in Appalachia anymore. It does feel more like the pit, and it's quite a large contrast to the typical lush greenery that you find in Fallout 76. And expeditions at their core are going to be repeatable missions, and they're going going to be broken up into a 1-2-1 format. So whether you do Union Dues or From Ashes to Fire, as soon as you land in your Verdbot, you're going to have somebody you go up to and talk to, and then you're going to have one mission that takes place in the external world space. And this mission will actually rotate. So if you do this several times in a row, or I guess several days in a row, in the same location, sometimes the first thing you do will be different, like protecting a saboteur, or other times defending a point from enemies that will attack it. And then from there, you're going to get a variety of additional objectives, but now it'll take you to an interior cell. In this, you're going to have several additional objectives, several extra things to do, and these two will rotate. And it seems like for each stage, there's going to be 3 different objectives that can pop up. So when you first get to that interior cell, it'll be something, and it'll choose from one of 3 options for you. And then when you get to the second stage, after you finish that first thing, it'll choose again from a different pool of 3 choices. And then once you complete all of that, you'll transition back outside for a final objective, and that is always going to be the same. There's no variation here. But the core takeaway being that expeditions are designed with a lot of variability in them. There's 2 separate missions that have even further different objectives each day within them. So if you play Union Dues several times in a row, each time it should be slightly different. And at the same time, there's a complete second mission there that has a completely different world space that also has the same amount of variability. Even further, while you're there in each of these locations, you'll face new enemies, these being the Fanatics, which are going to be the raider gang that inhabit this. One of the cool parts about this is they actually brought back the Fallout 3 styled power armor for these Fanatics. So in Fallout 3, power armor is really just armor. It looks like armor. And some of these Fanatics will actually wear power armor pieces as regular armor. As well as the Trogs, which are directly from Fallout 3, do make a return, although there's quite a bit more variability with these. There's several different variants that can pop up. And then during this, you're going to be doing objectives. I'm not going to run through all of the different combinations because there are a ton, but in general, what you'll be doing during these missions are things like holding down a point, defending an area from enemies that walk around it, defending a certain NPC from other enemies, actually looking for things in an area. This is a big one. In particular with Union Dues, Expeditions uses this mechanic where you'll have basically an area where an item or several items will spawn and you have to run around and find them. All the while there's a ton of enemies around, but you're going to be searching for something. Sometimes you have to take this for yourself, other times it's something you have to destroy. And during this, if you want to get the best rewards, there are also 2 optional objectives that you can take and do. There's going to be an NPC you could talk to get these, and each of these will involve you having to find something. Several of one thing, like these ingots that are a throwback to Fallout 3. There's going to be 5 of these scattered around. Some will appear in the outside portion, some will appear in the inside portion. They're relatively easy to find. When you get close to them, a quest marker will pop up, and then some other thing that you'll have to find, like supplies. There's some other minor variations between the 2. Union Dues definitely has a lot more of that searching, running around with the area of you have to find something. From Ashes to Fire definitely has a lot more combat focus. There's a boss fight at the end. It just felt like in general it was far more open with enemies coming at you from all angles and you having to kill them. And really, that's the new content. There really isn't anything super new or innovative here. It's a lot of the familiar Fallout content, specifically Fallout 76 content, but in a new place. You're going to be facing off against different enemies and now in the pit. If you're hoping Expeditions had a major questing component, that's really just not here. I mean, even on the lore front, there's very little going on in the pit. You can find a few things here or there. There's some people to talk to. There's actually way more people to talk to that will give you context to what's going on here at White Springs Refuge. I mean, you could even just compare the amount of NPCs in the pit versus the amount of NPCs in White Springs. And if you're looking for that familiar Fallout questing content, you won't find it here. There's a really well done reward spreadsheet on Expeditions that's going to do a way better job of explaining things than I will, but in general, Expeditions will introduce a new currency with stamps. There's going to be a new vendor at the White Springs Refuge that you can spend stamps with, and you can trade for a variety of new things, mostly camp items, but also some mods for an armor and a weapon. The way stamps are going to work is when you lead an expedition, when you actually go through the daily quests and do things yourself, you'll get a bonus 2 stamps. It's just a flat bonus you'll get every time. It's like a little extra that you're actually doing it. But then the way you'll get more stamps is by just actually doing all of the optional objectives. So in total, you could get 10 stamps a day at most when you lead one. And then after that, you could just keep doing them with other people as a team member and get 8 stamps each time. And there's no limit on how many times you could do this. You could do this all day if you want to. You just obviously need somebody to be a team leader each time. And even further, you can't actually return to the pit unless you're doing an expedition. There's no time limit. You can spend as much time as you want here. here, but the only way to get here is by doing an expedition. You can't just casually fly here. There's some other missed rewards, but also a bunch of rare items. Each week by doing an expedition, you're guaranteed one rare item. These are the same items you could buy with stamps, except as of right now, these are actually bugged, so the guaranteed drop isn't happening. Apparently it's getting fixed later this week though. The two notable new things added to the game with this update are the auto axe as well as this new power armor. You don't actually get them from the expeditions, you actually get them from the season system, from the scoreboard, so you have to invest into that and do those things if you want them. The expedition will give you mods for that content. There are a few other changes that came with this update that are also worth noting. Automatic melee weapons are now craftable. You can buy 100 modules at a time from the purveyor, so you won't have to server hop as much. New players will get this welcome kit to help boost the early game. The Gauss shotgun now counts as an energy weapon, so it's a buff of sorts. And on the Atomic Shop for $18, there's even this new giant shelter that is based off the pit, and it's actually really large, probably one of the coolest shelters they've released thus far. But overall, when it comes to my thoughts and opinions on this update, I'm actually a little bit mixed for two major reasons. On one hand, I actually encountered a lot of bugs with this update, more so than any of the past major updates, at least in the past year or two. My loading screens just broke the vast majority of the time. So like when I would go to launch an expedition, I thought the game just froze because I was just stuck at the screen, but no, actually things are loading, there's just no visual indication that's happening. This happened all the time at doors, and in general, it just was a kind of poor experience overall. The very first expedition I did actually broke halfway through. We completed the first objective on the interior, and then the second one just never popped up. We got the dialogue for it, but it took about 7 minutes for it to register that, okay, something else has to happen. I honestly have no idea what happened here, why things didn't progress, but definitely not a good first impression. In general, with expeditions, I found a lot more lag, my FPS was lower overall, and there were some issues with like not being able to talk to people. Like you'd have the quest objective to talk to an NPC, and you would have to spam the interact key to actually get them to talk to you. But even beyond some of the bugs that can easily be fixed, I feel like from a broader perspective, expeditions are one of those things where there's not really anything wrong with it, they're just not all that fun to me. Union dues in particular, I found to be very tedious at times. It's a lot of running around, going back and forth from one room to another. It's way better if you have people helping you, but a lot of the objectives are like, okay, you're gonna go in this room and search for a small thing and then either attack it or try and unlock it, and that's just not that fun to me. The other mission was definitely far more enjoyable. The environments were way more open, things were easier to find, but in general, it's kind of just that familiar gameplay loop. At the end of the day, you're running around, taking out enemies or holding down positions. It's not really anything new or super innovative. You're doing it in a new place, and that is kind of exciting to a degree, but then when you add in other things like the grind to get some of the new content, the grind you have to do with the daily quests beforehand to actually start the expeditions each day, there's kind of a lot of baggage with this, and I wish they did more in the lore front. Although I do think this is some of the most fun co-op content that's come to Fallout 76 thus far. Like messing around in a dungeon with a bunch of your friends on the microphone and then swapping out and doing the dungeons or missions subsequently with different team leaders could actually be a ton of fun. I feel like that is where this is the most fun, because this is one of those things where teamwork or having people spread out and running around separately is actually incredibly helpful, more so than most other things in Fallout 76. But if you're just doing this solo or doing it to grind for some of the new items, in that front, I just don't really think it's all that interesting. And to be clear, it's really just one of those things that I feel like is more a subjective issue. Expeditions aren't doing anything wrong, it's just me who's grown tired of this overall gameplay loop, and there isn't enough new here to make it really feel fresh and interesting again. I'll definitely continue playing them somewhat, I don't hate them, and it's a nice way to actually play with other people. I feel like it's some of the most fun co-op content, even more so than daily ops. But I think this is one of those features that's going to get stale relatively quickly. If you already own the game, this may be worth reinstalling for, but if you don't own the game and you weren't sold already, I'm not really sure Expeditions brings anything new to the table that makes Fallout 76 all of a sudden a must-buy. Now hopefully in the future more updates are coming, apparently a legacy fix, they mentioned having new quests in the future. I think a lot of people want that familiar Fallout questing content. I for one would love to see them add a couple of hours of quests to these new locations with the pit. But overall for me, Expeditions is really just a meh update. It's really not doing anything explicitly wrong. The bugs were annoying but not game breaking. And yeah, those are just my thoughts overall. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments down below. I feel like with this video more so than most others, it's really a subjective take. It's not that Expeditions are bad, it's just that I'm not having as much fun with them. But how do you feel? Maybe you're loving this. Maybe you love the new weapons, the new armors, you're just happy to have something new to grind to in a new place. Either way, as always, again, I thank you all for watching. I do hope you guys enjoyed this one, and with that, I hope to see you all next time. Later.